Something fishy this way comes. Chapter 14 of Eat Well, Move Well, Live Well, 52 Ways to Feel Better in a Week by Roland Denzel. A look at the world's most notorious superfood. Has there ever been a more confusing health food than fish? The news headlines and health recommendations are all over the place. Eat your fish, watch the mercury, get your omega-3s, wild caught is best. Is farmed more sustainable? What are PCBs anyway? Even with the confusing health points, pro and con, we have the issues of taste, the smell, and the cooking of the fish. People are rightfully confused, and when people get confused, they give up. Fish is a great source of healthy protein, and cold water fatty fish are some of the best sources of essential omega-3s you can find. Protein builds muscle, helps your bone density, aids in exercise recovery, and when it comes to weight loss, protein is more satiating than carbohydrates or fat. Omega-3s are a fat that keeps our brains and bodies healthy. They reduce inflammation, keeping us pain-free. They lessen the chances of disease of age and of the mind affecting us before our time. But fish are contaminated. True, but so is everything else. We live in a world where virtually every food we eat is contaminated by something toxic. Leafy greens, for instance, are the food most likely to make you sick, but we don't avoid eating them. We all know that eating leafy greens is important, so we're smart about it. We choose our greens wisely and wash them well. Eating fish is as important as eating leafy greens, and making smart choices about fish isn't as hard as we think. What are the big contamination concerns when it comes to fish? Mercury. Yes, fish has mercury, but you can't look at mercury in fish in isolation. Mercury doesn't tell the whole story. Selenium plays a big part too. It's a bit complicated, but in the end, you're more likely to have mercury issues from fish if you're deficient in selenium. Luckily, many fish also come loaded with selenium. As you can see in the graph, only the shark on the far right is an issue. Most of us don't eat much shark, and there's really no reason to start with so many healthier fish to choose from. We also recommend that you get selenium from other foods. For instance, just 2 to 3 Brazil nuts per week can provide enough selenium for most people's needs. PCBs and dioxins. While it's true that fish contain toxins like PCBs and dioxins, foods such as dairy, vegetables, beef, pork, and chicken all contain several times more. Even then, the biggest concern is a perceived increased risk of cancer. But the reduction in heart disease risk that comes from eating fish far outweighs the risk of cancer. Quote, per 100,000 individuals, consumption of farmed versus wild salmon would result in 24 versus 8 excess cancer deaths, respectively, while consumption of either farmed or wild salmon would result in 7,125 fewer deaths from heart disease. Unquote. A JAMA study, the link in the show notes. Radiation. While it's true that the Japanese nuclear meltdown has contaminated fish in the Pacific Ocean, the actual contamination levels of the fish are very low. Scientists studied fish that had migrated from Japan to San Diego and found that they did contain trace amounts of radiation from Japan, but that the levels of radiation from the incident were 30 times lower than the naturally occurring radiation in the fish. All foods on Earth naturally contain radiation, and fish actually has a lot less than that banana you recently ate, i.e., not that much. Better safe than sorry? Yes, and when it comes to fish, the safest thing seems to be to actually eat it. While a few studies using high mercury, low selenium fish, often whale, which is not even a fish, show some negatives, while many other studies show that mothers who eat high levels of seafood have healthier children, with better motor development and higher IQs. In fact, a study of 14,000 mother-child pairs found that the children of mothers who had eaten less than 12 ounces of fish per week had more significant impairments of communication skills when young, and that lower verbal IQs and communication skills continued on until adolescence. While some reports of contamination have suggested an increased risk of some diseases, the actual increased risk was insignificant compared to the increased life expectancy from adding fish to your diet. Not to mention the cognitive benefits and the lowered risk of diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's that come from a diet rich in the omega-3s found in fish. Yes, eating more fish was better, and eating less fish was worse. Now let's take a look at some of the best fish choices out there. Choosing the best fish for omega-3s. Fatty cold water fish are the best source of omega-3s, so choose salmon, mackerel, herring, sardines, and anchovies. Aim for at least 2 to 3 servings per week. Farmed salmon is still healthy, but not as healthy as wild salmon. Farmed fish are fed fish meal, which is cheap calories, not healthy food. More importantly, farmed fish are also overcrowded and fed antibiotics to keep them healthy. As a result, their fat makeup is not as good, their toxin levels are higher, and the farms themselves are environmentally devastating. While farmed fish might seem to be a good compromise, they really aren't. Tuna is often called a good source of omega-3s, and while its fats are good, tuna simply isn't very fatty. It's healthy and a great source of protein, but if you want your omega-3s, be sure to eat fatty fish too. What if I just can't do fish? If you can't or won't eat enough fatty fish, 2 to 3 servings per week, then a quality fish oil, krill oil, or algae oil supplement is important. Fish oil. I prefer capsules because of the convenience. Costco is a great source of fish oil capsules at a reasonable price. Because of the high turnover, their fish oil tends to be fresh and Consumer Reports gave it high ratings when analyzed. If you prefer liquid fish oil, look for one that's flavored with lemon or another flavoring to cover up that fishy taste. Krill oil. Krill oil is more costly, but a good solution for people who are allergic to fish. Fish get a lot of their omega-3s from krill. Can't think of a higher endorsement. Algae oil. Algae oil is where krill get their omega-3s. Talk about going to the source. Even if you do eat fish, it can't hurt to have a supplement in the fridge for those weeks when you mean to eat fish but never get around to it. Choosing the best fish for protein. Tuna has long been a favorite of bodybuilders due to its high protein content, good taste, canned or packaged convenience, and because of its relatively low price. It's also easy to have on hand since it lasts for years in the can. Fresh or frozen, fish like mahi-mahi, halibut, sea bass, sole, and tilapia are all great sources of protein because they have so little fat. Because the fats in the fish are so healthy, I hate to tell you to look for low-fat fish, but the reality is that if you're dieting and trying to get more protein, lower-fat fish is still a good choice. Just be sure to eat your fatty fish in addition to eating fish for protein. There's no substitute in your diet for omega-3s, so find a lesser fat, like cheap salad dressing, soybean oil, or corn oil, skip those, and make room for fatty fish. Choosing the best fish for the environment. Farmed fish versus wild-caught fish is a contentious issue. On one hand, wild-caught fish are healthier, both themselves and for us to eat, but catching them is dangerously reducing some species of fish. On the other hand, farm-raised fish require heavy doses of antibiotics, are overcrowded, and pollute the surrounding areas with their waste. Solutions on both sides are being sought, but in the meantime, I choose to eat fish that are the most sustainable, like wild-caught salmon and mackerel, sardines, anchovies, and herring. Thankfully, these are also some of the best sources of omega-3 fats. One great source of information on the sustainability of fish is the Monterey Bay Aquarium's Seafood Watch at seafoodwatch.org. In addition to charts for your local area, they have an online, interactive sushi and seafood selection guide, downloadable guides and recommendations, and even a smartphone app. The best fish for people who don't like fish. The least fishy fish are tilapia, snapper, sole, canned tuna, and mahi-mahi. And the most like meat are tuna steaks, ahi steaks, halibut, swordfish. Most of the least fishy fish are also very low in fat, fish oil, and omega-3s, so be sure to have a good fish oil supplement as well. Still have fears? Have more selenium. Brazil nuts are the winner when it comes to selenium, and 2 to 3 Brazil nuts per week is more than enough to serve as your selenium safety net and help protect you from mercury. Other good sources are beef, pork, and chicken, but you only need to eat an ounce of Brazil nuts to get the same amount of selenium as you'd find in 5 steaks. Also note that mercury is stored in the meat of the fish, not the fat, so don't worry about your fish oil. Choose small and fatty fish. Smaller, fattier fish tend to be lower on the food chain and have eaten fewer other fish themselves, and hence fewer contaminants. Sardines, herring, and anchovies are pretty small, and in the grand scheme of things, even a salmon is small. When it comes to tuna, choose chunk light tuna, which comes from the smaller, younger tuna. Chunk white is from bigger tuna, and solid white from bigger tuna still. Again, the less fatty fish you eat, the more you have to rely on fish oil for your omega-3s. But aren't grass-fed beef, omega-3 eggs, and flax seeds good sources of omega-3s? I'm afraid not. There are good reasons to choose grass-fed beef over conventional beef, but omega-3s aren't one of them. While grass-fed beef does contain several times the amount of omega-3s that feedlot beef contains, it's still a tiny amount, and not a significant source of omega-3s. Your tasks for this chapter. If you already like the taste of fish, or once you're more accustomed to it, just add more fatty fish to your diet. Choose 1 or 2 types of fish that you'd like to try. If you like fish, but you've been afraid to eat it, I hope you've been convinced that it's not only safe to eat fish, but safer to eat it than it is not to eat it. You can find preparation instructions and recipes in the resources section on our website at eatmovelive52.com/resources. Thank you for listening, and to hear more just like this, be sure to visit eatmovelive365.com.